There's been many memes and valid complaints about mobility creep in League. Pretty much every new champion that comes out is going to have at least one dash, if not many. But that doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom. There's plenty of ways that you can deal with it, and that's what I'm going to go into in this video. I'll be talking about the 3 types of mobility: dashes, raw movement speed, and teleports. Obviously, there's the answer of hard CC, but I'm not really going to go into that much in this video because why bother? Some champions straight up don't have hard CC, or maybe your team comp as a whole doesn't have hard CC. So if you're a Trinimir main, Callista main, whatever it may be, don't worry, I got you covered. As I mentioned earlier, the first type of mobility I'm going to be covering is dashes. Every dash is going to fall into at least one of these categories. Many of them fall into multiple. If that's the case, great, you have more ways to counter it. Damage, CC, and or shield linked to the ability. Some examples of this are Camille, Jarvan, Riven, and Renekton. What I mean by this is if Camille misses her E, she loses out on the damage and the stun from the ability. Same thing for Riven's Q, or if she uses her E, then the shield's going to be gone by the time she's in range to fight, assuming that you're spacing properly. The counter to this type of ability is making them use it to close distance or clear a wave before combat. If you stay just far enough away from the Riven to where she has to use 2 Qs to reach you, the fight's going to be much easier than if she can start in melee range with the first Q hitting. Obviously, for longer range abilities, this might be a little bit more difficult to do, but it's very possible. You just need to practice your tethering. High mana or energy cost. Some examples of this are Shen and Ezreal. These types of champions need to be more sparing with their abilities because they'll run out of resources quite quickly if they spam it. That's great because you can abuse that. The counter to these types of dashes is punishing them before their resources back up. You're looking for that war of attrition where you continually make them use the ability or another ability that makes them use resources so that they can no longer dash when they want to. High cooldown. Examples are Corki, Tristana, and Zed. This one should be pretty self-explanatory. They use their dash, it's on cooldown, then you can punish them while it's down. Obviously, once it's back up, then you have to respect it again. Lack of disengage whenever they use their dash as engage. Examples of this are Diana and Kha'Zix. Once they dash in, they're not going to be getting back out in most cases. So the counter to this is you have enough resistance to avoid their burst. This can be in the form of regular resistances like armor, HP, and magic resist, but it could also be from other things that can help stall, like Asterix Gauge, Azanias, or simply standing next to a teammate so that you can't be one-shot in a 1v1. Required to hit a target. Examples of this are a Mumu Q and a Kali E. All you have to do is dodge it. If the ability doesn't land, then they get no value. Of course, you do have to be careful of them hitting a different target that was not intended initially. For example, they could still hit a minion or a jungle camp behind you. In the case of a Kali, she could throw her E back into her shroud. So do keep that kind of thing in mind, but generally if you dodge it, you're in a good spot. Requires a target to be in range. These abilities are point and click. Examples are Diana E, Jax Q, and Echo E. The way you counter this type of ability is by avoiding being in range if possible, or getting some form of mobility yourself after they dash onto you. So if your champion has a speed up in its kit or phase rush, then that's fantastic. If that's not the case, as long as you have some kind of dash or another way to get the champion off of you, then that's great. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Since most champions have dashes that you're playing against, that means your teammates and yourself probably have a dash to work with, or at least some kind of way to get away. Refund or recast mechanic. Examples of the refund mechanic are Fiora and Irelia. So when you're looking at recast mechanic, this is going to be things like Renekton and Kled, where if they land their first dash, then they're going to be able to get another one off. You deal with these kind of dashes by denying whatever refund they're looking for. If it's on Irelia, make sure to punish her when she goes to land a Q on a minion. If it's Ambessa, try not to let her get the auto off that allows her to get her energy back. Obviously, she can still hit minions, but as long as you space well, then you're probably okay, because she also falls into the high cooldown situation. In lane, it may be a little bit difficult to avoid Fiora's condition because she gets it simply from hitting a minion. If you can space away from the wave or fight when minions aren't there, whether it be in lane before they've arrived or in the river, those are great times where she's not going to be able to spam her Q, especially if you can bait her into engaging and you avoid the initial Q. A general tip you can use for dashes is thinking about what your opponent wants to do with them. Most dashes, they're going to have to use on you or at least very close by in order to get value from it. So if you have any kind of skill shot that's kind of difficult to hit but does a lot of damage, that's going to be a great time to use it when your opponent has started their dash animation and they have no way to dodge it. Especially the point and click abilities like a Jax Q. Once he starts jumping in, there's no way your ability's not going to land. Movement speed buffs. Fast boys. There are many champions that have speed ups, and many of them share a similar weakness. Most really fast champions don't have a way to get over walls without using flash. Examples of this are Sivir, Zillion, and Nunu. Of course, there are some exceptions like Hecarim, Rammus, and Master Yi, but don't worry, there's still plenty of ways you can play around both of these types. The general counterplay is going to be getting deeper vision. Since they're really fast, you want to know well in advance when they're going to be appearing. So if you're laning, you may want to ward a little bit further into the river, or perhaps in an enemy jungle so you can know if they're ganking you. Good positioning, recognizing how fast they're going to be, and understanding how much distance you need to keep is always great for any champion. And terrain control. If you play a champion that can control space by producing some kind of wall, that's fantastic. Examples of this are Yorick, Anivia, Vhagar, anything like that. Even an Ornn will do. But if you don't play that kind of champion, that's okay. You can still control space with skill shots. If you have a wide skill shot that you know the opponent really doesn't want to get hit by, throwing that is a way to force them into a position that they don't want to go to, whether it be to back off or at least run into your teammate that's able to reach them and kill them. But if your champion doesn't have one of those kind of skill shots, then you probably have some pretty good point and click damage that you can use on the champion, and they can't dodge it. It doesn't matter how fast they are. Of course, I haven't even mentioned the obvious yet, but if you have any kind of slow, then that's fantastic. Doesn't even need to be from your champion. It can be from items that you build, whether it be Stride Breaker, Rylai's, whatever, or it can be from red buff, which is pretty easy to get later on because once the Baron buffs the buffs, everybody gets red buff when it's killed, so making sure that your teammates get that before fight is going to be really important. Bonus points if you can stop the enemy team from getting a red buff as well. It can also be helpful to kill Scuttle because that'll allow you to kite the really fast champions because you get the movement speed from that, assuming you're playing around it. For champions that can't be slowed, like Olaf and Yi, most of the time you're just looking to stall out their ultimates, so you try to get them to go in a little bit, but don't get too close to where they can actually reach you. The ability runs out and then you can look for a fight. Alternatively, you can always burst them if you got the homies with you. Worst case scenario, run to a blast cone and use that as a way to get out. Teleports. Outside of the summoner spell, every long range teleport is an ultimate, meaning that they have a consequential cooldown, which of course that would also apply to the summoner spell, especially earlier on in the game. What that means is that your goal is to bait out the teleport without anybody dying and look for opportunities later or elsewhere. Usually the easiest way to bait one out is to threaten to kill one of the enemies and watch as your opponent starts scrambling, immediately hitting whatever ultimate they have access to them to try to keep their teammate alive. You then walk away, go push a wave elsewhere, and you're in a really good position. It also makes it much easier for your teammates because their lane opponent is no longer there to fight them and they're able to farm for free. When it comes to team fights where these kind of abilities are used, you're going to have to be a little bit more careful and use your pings effectively to make sure that your teammates do have a way out once the ability has been baited. Although sometimes you can burst through it. In examples of Galio and Shen, you may be able to focus down enough damage to where their ultimate won't actually go through. If they happen to be channeling in your face, then of course you can also stop that by straight up killing them, or at least using some strong CC if you happen to have it. One final note that's going to apply for almost all cases, properly utilizing Fog of War to set up picks is going to make everything so much easier. If your opponents don't know you're there, and your team is able to clump up and burst them, you don't have to worry about any of these issues, because then you have a number advantage, and it's pretty hard to go wrong after that. If you're still watching this video, I appreciate it, and as always, if you're interested in getting free coaching from me in either top lane or jungle, the link to my Discord is in the description.